today, Friday, the 13th of December. We do expect that the administration of oath or affirmation of adherence for new members that's under Article 8.4 of the Constitution. As you might be aware, some countries actually recently had their independence, meaning they have new members of parliament and new speakers. So we'll see them taking oath.
And of course, we saw that again happening yesterday, where new members who didn't take off the previous day took off yesterday. So this is an activity also that is coming later as business resumes rather this morning. And after that, we have some motions to adopt reports. And the first motion is to adopt the report of the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus, that the report of the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus be adopted by the 56th Plenary Assembly, which will be moved by Honorable Sally Joseph Raymond, who's the chairperson of the committee, and the second is Honorable Rachel Zulu, who's the vice chairperson of the committee.
We have a motion for adoption of the report of the Standing Committee on Gender Equality, Women Advancement and Youth Development. That the report of the Standing Committee on Gender Equality, Women Advancement and Youth Development be adopted by the 56th plenary session. And this motion is going to be moved by Honorable Princess Kasune, who's the chairperson of this committee, and the seconder is Honorable Senator Tato Marco Mohale, who's the vice chairperson of this particular committee.
We don't have to get another motion. That is the notice of motion on enhancing efforts to integrate comprehensive sexuality education as in international schools curricula in starting member states, and that this motion will be moved by Honorable Tato Rupale from Lesotho, and the second is Senator Linda Zamalo Kumalo from Eswatini.
The other motion is that on the security situation in the SADC region to be adopted by the 56th Plenary Assembly. This one is going to be moved by Honorable Kenneth Moimang of South Africa, and it will be seconded by Honorable Makalatlo Musasele of Lesotho.
So quite some twisting, tongue twisting.
Yeah.
Like always. Yeah. But we take a bite. I think that's the correct pronunciation. Makatelo Mosasalale.
We are one. We are one actually. We are Bantu Botatwe, despite being Zambia and South Africa. We are one at the end of the day.
Exactly. Then after the motions, we have a statement on matters of importance to the forum by the Deputy Speaker and leader of the delegation of Botswana, Honorable NNP Manyeneng. That is on updating the 56th Plenary Assembly on the 2024 Botswana General Elections of 30th October, and that is pursuant to Rule 45 of the Rules of Procedure.
We also have an address by the representative of the Child Institute of Justice, Mr. Ron Chai. He's the Executive Director, on the commitment to partnership with SADC PF to develop the SADC PF model law on mining and to enhance parliamentary action on sustainable governance of critical minerals in the SADC region pursuant to Article 44.5 of the Rules of Procedure.
Thereafter, we expect an address by His Excellency Muhammad Nasheed, Secretary General of the Climate Change, Climate Vulnerable Forum, rather, that is advanced of the Paris Agreement in the SADC region, delivered pursuant to Rule 44.5 of the Rules of Procedure.
We also have another address by the representative of Conrad Adoniel Stiftang, that's Miss Aja Kappa Beretta. She's the head of the Energy Security and Climate Change in the Sub-Saharan African Program, on commitment of the partnership with the SADC PF to advance our parliamentary leadership and legislative effectiveness for energy security, renewable energy transitions and climate resilience in the SADC region pursuant to Rule 44.5 of the Rules of Procedure.
Another address, this time it will come from the representative of Africa Climate Foundation, Mr. Salim Fakar, Executive Director, on commitment to partnership with SADC PF to advance parliamentary action on climate resilience and food security in the SADC region pursuant to Rule 44.5 of the Rules of Procedure.
And the big one, that's the highlighter for today, is the elections. We know that we do have a president of the SADC PF. He's actually the Speaker of the Seychelles, Mr. Roger Massien, and we expect him to, hand over the presidency to another, person. And so we'll have an election of the SADC PF president and the vice president for the 2024 to 2026 pursuant to Article 11.2 of the Constitution and Rule 10 of the Rules of Procedure.
All right, and after this election, we expect a presentation of awards of recognition for serving in the executive committee for the period 2022 to 2024.
Of course, this will be followed by a handover ceremony by the outgoing SADC PF president and the SADC PF president-elect.
And of course, you've been with those of you who've been following us, you know that a lot of business have been conducted here. There's adoption of reports and also some resolutions that were made. And so, following the handover ceremony, we'll have presentation of the communique for the 56th plenary.
And of course, after that, we'll have the closing statement for the 56th plenary assembly session by the SADC PF President, Honorable Roger Massien. Is also Speaker of the Parliament of Seychelles.
So as you can see or can hear from our summary, or rather have quite some packed there, and after that closing statement, definitely that will be the end of the program.
Absolutely.
We've come a long way.
We do have come a long way, and the days have just flown by, just like that. But at the end of it all, we'll be here just to give you a recap of what will have transpired, and of course what transpired from the first day today.
Exactly. All right, and of course in between we'll have breaks. This is just a program that shapes the whole day from now until the end of the program, but of course I will be back on the other side during break time, just to give you where we are, to give you updates on what has taken place and what is coming up next. And so it seemingly have 16 items on the order paper. It's not an easy day.
It's not an easy day, but exciting. The fact that Zambia is hosting this conference for the third time, so it's really something to brag about, Julius.
Exactly. And certainly, I'm sure as we come back to break, we should be able to also indicate to our listeners and our followers, those who are contesting for elections, because it's an election time. We don't know. We don't have a list of candidates here to contest on which positions. We're able to give you that update on the contestants on the positions that are available for elections.
All right. So we are going to sit back and wait for the Speaker's procession to make its way into the conference room.
All right, so just as you can see in the background of your picture there, guests are just settling in, and shortly we expect that procession to make way into the we call it the chamber, right?
It's the chamber. Exactly. It's just like we are, exactly, back home at at National Assembly. It's everything that happens. It's like it happens in the chamber.
The sitting arrangement is in the way that the president takes as a presiding officer there. Then we have clerks at the table in the front.
Absolutely.
Of course, we have the front bench, which is being occupied by speakers or leaders of each delegation, and then we have the back benches, who are the accompanying members of parliament, who are seated right behind their delegations, and then of course we have observers and us who are in the galleries.
Absolutely. Even the language is the same, like back home, move of emotion, the second of emotion, all that.
Of course, also it's important, Claudia, to mention that SADC has adopted 3 languages, and so the use of English, Portuguese, and French is of equal importance, and so that's how come you may find an address being done in Portuguese, and we'll send you a live signal of interpretation in English, or if it's done in Portuguese, in French, we'll also bring to your screen or your airwaves an audio of the interpretation in English. Otherwise, SADC has adopted those as official languages in the region.
So we urge you to sit back and tune in or listen in to the live proceedings that will be happening here at Radisson Blu Hotel.
And of course, we appreciate those comments that you keep dropping on our social media platforms. That's our YouTube channel as well as the Facebook channel. You can also send your text line message to our studio text line, although we cannot access that text message from here. But of course, we appreciate all those comments that are coming through to us.
All right, so we meet again at break time. For now, it's a bye from us as we wait for the Speaker's procession to make its way into the conference room.
Watch.
allow for a moment of silent prayer. Thank you. Please be seated. Honorable members, good morning and welcome to day 5 of our plenary assembly. I am very happy to see you all cheerful this morning, and I am also happy to assure you that our plenary assembly has proceeded well and successfully, and we look forward to a successful conclusion today. With this, I hope you will be giving your full attention to the business at hand. Honorable members, I just need to remind you, it's in the procedure that the deliberations are in 3 official languages, English, French, and Portuguese, and that the documents, all documents being referred to in the program are available on the portal electronically, which is provided to all delegations. Honorable members, I have received a communication from a member parliament submitting the names of new members designated to the SADC-PF pursuant to Article 7 of the SADC-PF Constitution. As you know, it is a constitutional requirement for all new members to take either an oath or affirmation of adherence in accordance with Article 8 of the SADC-PF Constitution. I therefore invite the Secretary General to administer either the oath or affirmation of adherence to the members from Madagascar, the Honorable Speaker Justin Tokeli, and the Honorable Lova Herizo Rajao Belena. Please step forward.
Good morning, honorable members. Honorable member, you may kindly choose between taking an oath and making an affirmation and proceed accordingly to repeat after me. Moi,
Tokeli Justin, je prête solennellement serment devant cette auguste assemblée plénière du Forum parlementaire de la SADC que je respecterai la Constitution et les règlements intérieurs du Forum parlementaire de la SADC, régional du Forum parlementaire de la SADC. Date 13 décembre 2024, lié Livingston.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. I have the honor to present to you the Constitution and the Rules of Procedure of the SADC Parliamentary Forum.
Félicitations, Monsieur le Président.
Honourable Member, I'm told you take oath. Kindly repeat after me. Say aye.
Moi, Rajaobelina Louvairzo,
Take the oath before this August Plenary Assembly of the SADC Parliamentary Forum.
je prête solennellement serment devant cette auguste assemblée plénière du Forum parlementaire de la SADC que je respecterai la Constitution et le règlement intérieur du Forum parlementaire de la SADC et que je ferai preuve de respect envers les organes institutionnels du Forum et que je respecterai au mieux de mes capacités les principes directeurs et les valeurs fondamentales du Forum parlementaire de la
the guiding principles and core values of the SADC Parliamentary Forum today on the 13th of December 2024 in Livingston.
Thank you very much. I'll now hand over the rules of procedure and the Constitution.
Congratulations to the member. Congratulations to the member from Madagascar. Honorable members, it is a pleasure for me on your behalf to welcome our delegation from Madagascar, comprising of the Speaker and the Honorable Member. Thank you. Honorable members, we will proceed with the order for the day. I again remind you that when given the floor, you are allocated 5 minutes for any intervention. Honorable members, I will now call for notices of motions, if there are any for today. Are there any notices of motions? There being none, we will proceed with the order of business, and I call on the Secretary General to read the first order.
Motion for the adoption of the report of the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus.
The motion for the adoption of the report of the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus is in the name of the Honorable Shali Josepha Raymond, its chairperson. Honorable, would you please move the motion in your name?
Thank you, Mr. President. I beg to move that this plenary assembly do adopt the report of the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus on the 56th plenary assembly laid on the table on 10th December 2024.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I will now call for a second, and the Honorable Rachel Zulu, the Vice Chairperson of the caucus, is due to second.
Yes, Mr. President, I rise to second the motion represented by the Chairperson, Regional Parliamentary Women's Caucus. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable, for the secondment. I shall now call the Chairperson to address on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, in the moving this motion, I wish to inform this August House that the RWPC held a virtual meeting on Tuesday, 22nd October 2024 in accordance with mandate under the Rule 42, subsection D, on the forum's rules of procedure. Read under the theme, leveraging the role of the SADC Parliamentary Forum in facilitating citizen participation in SADC region, integration for enhanced accountability and inclusive socio-economic development and cohesion. I must say that the theme of our meeting was particularly appropriate because the women parliamentarians of SADC are firm believers that the participation of citizens is a prerequisite for the good governance to the region. Given this backdrop, Mr. President, the meeting was also a timely reminder to all of us that promotion, democracy, and good governance through interaction between ourselves and our citizens is important in two ways. Firstly, it builds the confidence of citizens in the work of the forum, and secondly, it enriches our understanding of the various challenges that our citizens face. Mr. President, the meeting also offered us parliamentarians as decision makers an opportunity to consider possible issues that affect the lives of the citizens in general. We were therefore greatly privileged to have an opportunity to interact with various citizens who raised several important issues around the issue of gender, equality, and women's participation. Mr. President, the meetings of the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus are very important, as it is through these meetings that the goals of the caucus for given period are concretized. The meetings of the caucus also serve as a capacity building a platform for the membership of the caucus. As the House is aware, Mr. President, capacity building is a critical ingredient in the effective performance of the work of parliamentarians, as one needs to keep abreast with emerging issues in order to be able to address those issues. In today's fast-paced world, changes occur quickly and members of parliament are expected to keep up. In this regard, the caucus deeply appreciates the capacity building opportunity provided by the meeting. Mr. President, the deliberations focused on 5 thematic areas, namely women's leadership on climate change and disaster risk management, gender responsive budgeting and resource allocation, participation, addressing gender inequality in the region, and economic empowerment of women in rural and informal settings. Arising from the deliberations of the caucus, allow me to briefly focus on the prevailing situations as regards the plight of women and girls and the existing gender inequalities in the region. Mr. President, from the submission of citizens, representatives, and partners who interacted with the caucus, it was disappointing to learn that women in the region continues to face discrimination and unequal access to resources such as food, water, and land, among others. Further, little has changed with regard to lack of acceptance of women's leadership and perspectives in decision-making space. For example, women's limited access to resource and decision-making power hinders their ability to adapt and mitigate the effects of climate change. Furthermore, women continues to face political, socio-economic, and cultural barriers to political participation. In the light of the foregoing, the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus, in its report to the Assembly, has made several wide-ranging recommendations to the 56th Plenary Assembly, including but not limited to the need for SADC member states to enact legislation that promotes women's participation and leadership in decision-making space on climate change and disaster risk management, as well as integrate gender into disaster risk reduction. Other recommendations include a call for SADC member states to allocate adequate financial resources to address the specific needs of women with disabilities as a matter of priority. In the same vein, SADC member parliaments should strengthen their oversight role on the budget process to ensure accountability and transparency in the allocation of resources, as well as undertaking gender impact analysis to ensure that the national budgets are endangered. Together with this, youth should also be considered. These are but a few of the recommendations contained in the report before the House today, and I urge all members of familiarize themselves with the appreciate the totality of comprehensive content of the report. In concluding, Mr. President, allow me to place on record the gratitude of the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus to the SADC-PF Secretariat for convening and coordinating the virtual meetings and enabling us to interact with various citizens and partners. Tribute also go to the citizen representatives and partners who, through their targeted contributions to the thematic areas of focus, enrich the deliberations of the meeting. Let me also take the opportunity to thank all members of the caucus for taking time to participate in the meeting in spite of other pressing assignments at national level, which allows their individual and collective commitment to address the challenges that prevent women from participating in decision-making process and structures. With that, Mr. President, I seek the support of the 56th Plenary Assembly to adopt the report of the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus. Mr. President, I beg to move, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. I will now call on the Honorable Rachel Zulu, the Vice Chairperson, to give her address in seconding.
Mr. President, I rise to second and express support for the motion for the adoption of the report of the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus, which is now before this August House. Mr. President, in seconding this motion, I wish to reiterate the gratitude of the Chairperson to the Forum Secretariat for working diligently to make sure that all the necessary logistics were put in place to make the meeting happen. I must also press on record my satisfaction with the level of participation by the members who were present in the meeting. This, coupled with the rich and well thought out presentations that were received by various citizens, representatives and partners, made for a very fruitful meeting of the caucus. Allow me to state, Mr. President, that women's political participation is critical for a well-functioning democracy. Their inclusion in the matter of justice and a key factor in creating more effective governance, effective governance. Available evidence shows that having some women in policy making helps to advance registrations on crucial issues such as health, education, childcare, infrastructure, and ending violence against women. It also serves as an inspiration for girls to pursue higher education and career opportunities. Yet women's voices are missing from decision making in every region of the world. It is notable that the most significant gap in women political representation is found at the highest level of power, with 107 countries never having had a female leader. This situation is unacceptable and requires immediate intervention and concerted effort by all of us. Mr. President, I have to report that the thematic areas traversed during the deliberations, which have already been outlined by the chairperson, were fully interrogated. Consequently, the deliberations on the above themes provided the women parliamentarians as decision makers an opportunity to offer viable solutions to issues that affect women empowerment and their participation in matters that affect their lives in general. We are indeed hopeful that through some of our recommendations, the region can move towards promoting the representation and participation of women in decision-making structures, engender our budgets, and ensure inclusivity of women with disability at all levels. Mr. President, no one should be left behind in our development efforts. Mr. President, honorable members, with these few remarks, I wish to second the motion, and I thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Honorable members, the floor is now open for debate on the motion. Would members who wish to address please raise their country tags. The honorable member from Seychelles has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Honorable Shali, for presenting the report. Mr. President, women participation in politics and in parliament is of great importance in the SADC region. Seychelles, as a member of SADC-PF, we are proud to note and report that our percentage of representation has slightly increased over the representation in parliament has slightly increased over the past 2 years. And today we have increased from 26.4%, and to date we are at 29.4% in parliament. Then the score has risen recently because a male representative who was from the opposition has been replaced by a woman. The fight for equal representation in Seychelles is an ongoing issue, and we are proud to say that women in parliament in Seychelles are given the prominent role, and we can have the voice of women in parliament. But we are not yet there at the 30% representation, and now we are talking about 50% representation, which is our goal. But I assure SADC-PF that we will continue to push for women in higher position in decision-making processes and in parliament in the next election that is coming. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We have concluded the debate on the motion. I therefore put the question that the Regional Women's Parliament Caucus report be adopted. Are there any objections? There being no objections, the report of the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus is duly adopted. Thank you, and once again, congratulations to the caucus, and thank you for your work and your report. As Secretary General, would you please read us the second order?
Motion for the adoption of the report of the Standing Committee on Gender Equality, Women Advancement and Youth Development, gay-wide.
The motion for the adoption of the report of the Standing Committee on Gender Equality, Women Advancement and Youth Development is in the name of the Honorable Princess Kasune, its chairperson. Honorable Member, would you please move the motion?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Mr. President. I beg to move that the 56th Plenary Assembly do adopt the report of the Standing Committee on Gender Equality, Women Advancement and Youth Development gay-wide, which was laid on the table on the 11th of December 2024.
Thank you. If we have the seconder on the floor, the Honorable Senator Thato Mako Mohale, Vice Chairperson, I invite you to second.
Thanks, Mr. President. I rise to second the motion.
Thank you. Will the Honorable Kasune please present the report?
Thank you, Mr. President, and many thanks to the August House. And I have to say that this will be my last report, as already alluded to, that I will be exiting SADC Parliamentary Forum. Guided by its mandate to address gender equality, women's advanced and empowerment, youth development, and children's issues as outlined in its term of reference under Rule 42A of the Rules of Procedures of the SADC Parliamentary Forum, the gay-wide committee held a virtual public hearing session on the 23rd of October 2024. The session was held under the theme leveraging the role of SADC Parliamentary Forum in facilitating citizen participation in the SADC region, integrating for enhanced accountability and inclusive socio-economic development. Mr. President, and indeed this August House, the session received submissions on various thematic issues, including how SADC parliamentary can enhance their legislative oversight and representative role to promote inclusive citizen participation, particularly for women and youth. The session explored strategies to advance gender parity and youth development, addressing the challenges and the opportunities in the areas such as youth employment, education, and entrepreneurship, and representation in decision making. While progress in women's and youth representation was acknowledged, the committee noted ongoing challenges, including gender disparities in leadership roles and barriers for rural and marginalized communities. It is recommended, therefore, to domesticate the SADC model law on the eradication of child marriage, reinforcing the SADC PF commitment to protecting the rights of women and children. Mr. President, the committee reviewed the revised SADC gender parity framework, which updates the 2029 framework and aims to address the persistent gender disparity while fostering inclusive participation across the region. The revised framework seeks to achieve gender parity in politics and decision-making
by 2035, emphasizing gender sensitivity in the electoral reforms, legislative measures, and quota systems to support women in leadership. It also outlined strategies to combat discrimination, violence, and emerging challenges such as cyberbullying. The committee recognized the importance of sustained efforts to tackle systematic barriers, including poverty and entrenched cultural norms and unequal access to resources, while acknowledging the historical milestones such as the 1997 SADC Declaration on Gender and Development and the 2008 Protocol. It noted the ongoing underrepresentation of women in leadership roles and stressed the agency of immediate action. The committee endorsed the revised framework, reviewing it as a significant step towards strengthening women political engagement across SADC member states. Highlights from the UN Women enriched the discussions on gender equality, underscoring the critical role of gender quotas and the need for measures to address violence against women in politics. These collaborative efforts are expected to advance the region's commitment to achieving gender parity and fostering inclusive governance. Mr. President, and indeed to this august House, the committee reviewed ongoing efforts addressing violence against women in politics and election VAWEP, and eliminate all forms of violence against women and girls. It recognized the SADC-PF collaboration with civil society organizations to advocate for the domestication of model laws protecting women and girls' rights. The committee noted the SADC-PF efforts to implement its resolution on promoting youth empowerment and participation in the region's political, economic, and decision-making process. Key initiatives included prioritizing youth submissions during the public hearing that engaged over 300 young people from 16 member states by the Secretary General during the 6th Southern Africa Youth Forum held on the 10th to the 13th of August in Harare, Zimbabwe. In addition, the committee welcomed the initiative of inviting a youth representative to address the plenary assembly on the regional youth issues. It also reaffirmed its commitment to advancing the establishment of a SADC Parliamentary Forum Youth Caucus in line with the plenary assembly resolution. The committee also received presentations on leveraging future thinking to strengthen resilience and long-term planning in the SADC region, with presenters emphasizing the importance of gender and youth focused policies to address the gap in data, digital transformation, and legislative support. Highlighted also was the inclusion of developmental strategies, particularly through advancing gender and youth participation in governance. Mr. President, submissions on legislative and oversight measures to ensure gender parity emphasized the need of equal representation and highlighted the persistent barriers such as violence against women in politics and weak policy enactment. Tackling child marriage and gender-based violence was another critical focus. Presenters called for a stronger legislation, community action, and expanded access to sexual and reproductive health services. On education and skills development, speakers highlighted the urgent need for equitable opportunities, particularly for the marginalized women and youths. submissions also stressed need of inclusive policies, economic empowerment, and culturally responsive teachings to address the intersectoral inequalities and create lasting change. Similarly, improving youth presentation in governance was discussed with the call for capacity building, mentorship programs, and platforms to amplify youth voices in the decision-making process. Finally, the digital divide was identified as a significant barrier to inclusive participation for women and youth, particularly in rural areas. Presenters highlighted the need to address insignificant inefficiency, digital infrastructure, skills gaps, and material challenges to promote equitable access to the digital economy and reduce the regional disparities. Mr. President, following this deliberation on the submissions received, the committee resolved to recommend the following to the 56th Plenary Assembly as follows. On the legislative and oversight measures to strengthen the implementation of regional gender parity framework at the national level, and the committee resolved to recommend to the Plenary Assembly these following recommendations. 1. Welcome the revision of the SADC framework for gender parity and the involvement of parliamentarians, and emphasize the importance of compliance through effective implementation and strengthening accountability mechanisms and tangible progress towards gender parity across all sectors in the southern region. Number 2, reiterate the urgent need to address legislative gaps in regulating digital tools, artificial intelligence, and social media, which have contributed to disinformation and cyber violence, particularly against women in politics, while safeguarding freedom of expression. Thirdly, emphasize the need to introduce constitutional and legislated gender parity quotas in decision-making positions, adopt more inclusive electoral systems, and appoint women to strategic positions, especially in social policy areas affecting the marginalized groups. May I insert my own personal thoughts? Others who have thought have said that also women should be considered in what will be called hardcore policies such as home affairs, defense, justice, and finance. To reiterate, number 4, the importance of addressing financial barriers for women in politics through political party funding laws that support women campaigns, including linking public funding to gender parity. Number 5, emphasize Parliament's critical role in achieving gender parity, including enacting right-based laws, domestication of regional and international commitments on women's political participation, establishing gender-focused committees, and ensuring all parliamentary outputs eliminate gender discrimination. Number 6, emphasize the importance of partnering with civil society in gender parity advocacy and ensuring compliance, including through public interest litigation of cases of non-compliance with existing laws and policies. Number 7, promoting gender parity by adopting progress right-based approaches, especially where customary laws contradict constitutional principles such as the male primogeniture. I guess this simply means the right to inheritance. Number 8, reiterate the influential role of traditional leaders in advancing gender equality by addressing social culture barriers such as restrictive culture practices and gender-based violence, fostering inclusion attitude in their communities. Number 9, emphasize the importance of full inclusion of youths in governance process to build a more inclusive and equitable society, recognizing the significant proportion of young people in the region's population. Number 10, reiterates the need to focus on women and girls with disabilities, acknowledging their multiple forms of discrimination that hinders their socio-economic and political inclusion. Mr. Speaker, and indeed to this August House, on tackling the child marriage and gender-based violence among youths through legislation and education programs, the committee resolved to recommend to the plenary the following. 1. Call for the increased advocacy for the domestication of the SADC model law on eradicating child marriage, stricter penalties for the offenders, stronger child marriage against child marriage laws, and the decriminalization of abortion to ensure women and girls have autonomy over their reproductive health decisions. Number 2, urge more awareness campaigns to challenge harmful practices involving local leaders in shifting these norms, engage youth as advocates against child marriage and gender-based violence, equipping them to promote gender equality and peer education on these very important rights. Thirdly, call for the expanded educational opportunities for girls alongside life skills and economic empowerment programs to reduce pressure for early marriage and vulnerability to gender-based violence, fostering a more self-sufficient and informed choices. Number 4, call for the establishment of safe spaces, counseling, legal support for survivors of child marriage and gender-based violence to ensure proper care and reintegration while making SRI-HRS services youth-friendly and accessible, in particular in rural areas. On measures to ensure equitable access to education and skills development for women and youths, the committee resolved to recommend the following to the plenary assembly. 1. Call for the implementation of regular impact evaluations, gender disaggregated data collection and feedback mechanism to access educational access and adaptation programs for improved outcomes. Secondly, encourage the integration of gender-sensitive curriculum, the increase of the proportion of female teachers, the establishment of culturally responsive teaching methods, and the provision of safe spaces and targeted support to create inclusive educational environment for the marginalized students. Thirdly, call for the adoption of the inclusive education policy, anti-discrimination laws, and quotas for the women in education and vocational programs, and launch of awareness campaigns to challenge stereotypes, promote equality, and inform women and youth about educational and career opportunities. Mr. President, and to this House, on the importance of youth representation in decision-making process at the national and regional level, the committee resolved to recommend the following to the plenary assembly. First, encourage prioritizing futures thinking in SADC policy making to ensure long-term inclusive growth, leveraging frameworks like the SADC Youth Development Policy and the Protocol on Gender and Development. Secondly, call for urgent action to address youth employment, digital literacy, and skills gaps, particularly for women, to reduce disparities and to promote equal economic participation across the region. Thirdly, call for stronger partnerships between Parliament, civil society, youth organization, and experts to improve data collection and inform governance. And fourth, encourage the establishment of youth inclusive policies to create pathways for youth involvement in decision making at the national and regional level. And number 5, urge parliaments to keep promoting platforms for youth dialogue and integration of their voices in policy decisions through forms of inclusive consultative bodies and across sector partners. As the youth have always reminded us, nothing for the youth without the youth themselves. As I come to conclude here, on initiatives to reduce the digital divide for women and youths, particularly in rural communities, the committee resolved to recommend for the Plenary Assembly the following. First, urge SADC member states to act swiftly on digital inclusion commitments and provide regular progress reports focusing on women and youth. Secondly, call for the urgent measures to address legal gaps and gender and youth responsive budgeting for expanding infrastructure, particularly in underserved rural communities. Thirdly, encourage formation of policies that promote affordable internet access through pricing models, subsidize and creation of safe, accessible public internet centers. And fourth, call for the integration of digital literacy and gender equality in our education curriculum from an early age to equip youths for active participation in the digital space. The fifth and the last one, for the development of ICT age, for the development of the ICT policies with gender specification targeting to enhance the representation of women and youths in the digital governance and work with traditional leaders to address social barriers and ensure online safety. The committee would extended its apologies to the African Population and Health Research Center, APHRC, and SAFEDS, whose submissions were waitlisted but could not be presented due to the high volume of interest and the time constraints. While regrettable, this highlights the increased popularity and significance of the public hearing as a vital platform for citizens' participation. Mr. President, I will be remiss in moving this motion if I didn't appreciate the Secretary General of the SADC Parliamentary Forum and the entire staff for the support they rendered to the committee while it sat, as well as coming up with this report. It is on this note, Mr. President, and indeed to this august House, I beg to this House that the reports of the committee be adopted by the Plenary Assembly. I beg to move. I thank you.
Report. The floor will now be for the Senator Muhale to address in secondment.
Mr. President, I rise to second the motion to adopt the report of the Standing Committee on Gender Equality, Women's Advancement and Youth Development by the 56th Plenary Assembly, which has been ably moved by the chairperson of our committee. Mr. President, this report epitomizes the excellent work being undertaken by the committee. It provides invaluable insight into the pressing issues of gender equality, women's empowerment, and youth development within the SADC region. It also highlights the crucial role we, as members of parliament, play in ensuring that our societies become more just and inclusive through collective action. Mr. President, the public hearing sessions held by the SADC PF since 2022 are a testament to the forum's unwavering commitment to promoting and strengthening accountability and fostering social cohesion in regional integration through citizen engagement and participation. The fact that some citizens and partner organizations submissions have had to be wasteland or have failed to be submitted due to oversubscription underscores the relevance of this intervention. We should pat ourselves on the back for being an open institution and reaffirm our commitment to consistently placing citizens at the center of all our initiatives. Mr. President, the report reflects on the significant progress we have made as the SADC PF and as a region, while also highlighting the areas where more work is needed. It acknowledges the persistent challenges in ensuring women and youth full political and economic participation, especially those in rural and marginalized communities. I therefore urge the members of this august House to embrace the proposed strategies that will break down the barriers of gender inequality and empower our youth to take their rightful place in decision-making processes by adopting this report. Therefore, the recommendations in this report are both timely and necessary. The call for legislative reforms, including gender quotas and policies to eliminate violence against women in politics, is a step towards creating a more inclusive and just society. The emphasis on addressing the digital divide, especially in rural areas, will ensure that women and youth are not left behind as we move towards a future driven by technology. Furthermore, the report rightly recognizes the critical role of parliaments in promoting gender equality and youth empowerment. By engaging youth in policy making and ensuring that gender-sensitive laws are passed, we as legislators can take a bold step towards achieving the goals of the SADC Protocol on Gender and Development. Mr. President, the report is not just a reflection of where we are, it is a call to action. It invites all of us to be part of a movement that will bring about real changes for women and youth across the SADC region. I urge this Assembly to adopt the report with the same determination and commitment that has characterized our shared efforts in promoting the rights of women, especially young girls, youth, and persons with disabilities. Mr. President, I therefore second the motion. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member, for your address in secondment. The floor is now open for debate. Members who wish to address, please hold your country tag up for a moment while we take note. Honourable members, I have a long list of members who wish to address. I remind you to be brief in making your intervention. We will start with the member from Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Honorable President, for giving me this opportunity to give my contribution to the motion raised by the chairperson of Gender Equality, Women Advancement, Youth Development, Honorable Minister Princess Kasune. Mr. President, Zimbabwe has placed a strong emphasis on promoting gender equality as part of its contributions to SADC regional integration. Accordingly, the country has made substantial strides in mainstreaming gender in national policies and has continued to advocate for gender responsive regional integration frameworks. Just to pick a few, Honorable President, Zimbabwe, through the Ministry of Women Affairs, Gender and Community Development, has ensured that issues such as women's economic empowerment, education, and access to the decision-making spaces are included in the SADC socio-economic integration agenda. Zimbabwe has a comprehensive revised national gender policy which covers contemporary challenges such as gender and development, gender and climate change, as well as the youth. In the same vein, the country has invested in the microfinance bank dedicated to women, the Zimbabwe Women Microfinance Bank, which gives out loans and digital literacy training in pursuit of the goal of financial inclusion of all women in the economic sector. Mr. President, honorable members, in line with the SADC's call for youth engagement, Zimbabwe has made notable strides in promoting youth development and increasing the participation of young people in regional integration processes. The country has created platforms for youth to engage in decision-making and ensure that their concerns, particularly around employment, education, and skills development, are addressed within the broader regional integration framework. Honorable President, may you take note that Zimbabwe has implemented a 10% youth quota in Parliament. On top of that, there is a women's quota whereby 10 are youth according to our youth, and they are females according to the Zimbabwe Constitution. These are represented throughout the 10 provinces of the country. By doing so, Zimbabwe has enabled its youth to have a voice in both national and regional
forums and hereby contributing on the SADC goal of an inclusive, equitable and sustainable regional development agenda. Mr. President, may I also bring it to your attention that through the enabling leadership of our Speaker of Parliament, Honorable J.F.N. Mudenda, Zimbabwe has put in place a very vibrant youth caucus with 21 youth members of Parliament. Zimbabwe has also made significant progress in enhancing citizen participation in governance. The government has taken steps to promote transparency and accountability in the implementation of policies. This has been achieved through public consultations, media engagements, and inclusion of civil society organizations in policy dialogue. Notably, Mr. President, Zimbabwean Parliament engaged in budget consultations across country in anticipation of the 2025 national budget to consolidate and incorporate the views of the public in the national budget. These platforms allow Zimbabwean citizens to contribute to resource allocation, ensuring that the process is responsive to their needs in their diversity, taking into consideration needs of women, girls, boys, and people with disability. As usual, accountability remains central through its implementation. In conclusion, Mr. President, as we move forward in implementing the recommendations from the Standing Committee of Gender Equality, Women Advancement and Youth Development, I call on all of us to remain steadfast in our commitment to inclusive governance and accountability through continued collaboration with the SADC Parliamentary Forum and other regional bodies. Zimbabwe will continue to contribute meaningfully to the achievement of a more integrated, cohesive, and prosperous Southern Africa. With these few contributions, I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I will give the floor to the member from South Africa.
Thank you very much, President. And in supporting the report of the Standing Committee on Gender Equality, I want to, before I start with the full text of my statement, just convey the fact that as South Africa, in the past Parliament before the 29 May elections, we made a fully comprehensive review of the Women's Charter since 1994 for the past 25 years. And as I've been listening to the report of the chairperson, I realized that the common issues and the common challenges that we are experiencing as the SADC region makes it compelling for us to build a case within which we ensure women and youth representativity in all echelons of power. As we convene, we find ourselves amidst a landscape of uncertainty, driven by conflicts, natural disasters and geopolitical tensions. The intertwining of violent conflicts with poverty not only obstructs the fulfillment of basic human needs, but also hampers the prospects for the future, especially for marginalized groups such as women, youth, and other vulnerable populations. In our region, violent conflicts have led to the internal displacement of millions, with a significant portion being women and children. To truly advance the rights of women and youth, particularly in eradicating poverty, for efforts in ensuring the implementation of our regional framework, including the Regional Indicative Strategic Development Plan, which encompasses clear strategies for poverty alleviation, economic development, and so emphasizing the importance of peace and security as foundational elements for sustainable development. Furthermore, it supports several projects aimed at improving infrastructure, healthcare, and education, laying the groundwork for more stable and a more stable and prosperous future for all. I would love to urge other countries that are yet to be party to the Protocol on Politics defense and security cooperation to do so earnestly. As this protocol is a cornerstone of our region's efforts to maintain peace and stability in Southern Africa, fostering a collaborative approach to regional security and political issues. By addressing the root causes and consequences of conflicts, we can provide women and youth with the opportunity to rebuild their lives and communities, empowering them to participate meaningfully in all processes in society. The 2023 report of the SADC Executive Secretary indicates that the region continues to make strides towards strengthening and consolidating democracy, including a notable reduction in election-related conflicts. However, there is a limited representation still of women and youth in leadership and decision-making positions. Women continue to experience gender-based violence and cyberbullying. I'm sorry, let me just get back to where I was. Especially when they stand for political positions, hampering equal participation. The disheartening revelation is that our citizens are unaware of the opportunities for socio-economic improvement through regional integration. The lack of information about some of the most basic SADC initiatives diminishes the sense of belonging to the regional community. This is an area that our forum should focus on in terms of raising awareness about these initiatives, as they have the potential to change the lives of our citizens. Honorable President, while the region has taken commendable strides in establishing legal and policy frameworks and essential institutions to advance women and youth empowerment, it is imperative to match these efforts with robust legislative action and monitoring to ensure the effective implementation of these measures and to bring about substantial change for our people. South Africa stands in full support of the recommendations outlined in the report, particularly the call for the implementation of regular impact evaluations, collection of gender disaggregated data, and the establishment of feedback mechanisms to assess access and adapt programs for improved outcomes. In conclusion, we must consolidate our efforts and continue our dedication to transforming the difficulties faced by women and youth in the wake of conflict. By leveraging a comprehensive approach and supporting the recommendations provided, we can pave the way for lasting change and progress in our region, and we support the call to action. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I will now give the floor to one of the members from Namibia at this point. Please take the floor.
Thank you very much for the floor. Mr. President, I would like to take the floor to support the motion. In Namibia, there has been always a political will to promote gender equality and parity and youth participation. The Constitution made provision for the promotion of gender equality and gender policy, and action plan were adopted as far as back as 1997. The implementation of these instruments was, however, slow until the intensification of advocacy for increased women representation in Namibia and other countries of the region. Parliament of Namibia has also approved zero tax on sanitary pads to ensure accessibility for all girls and women. This remarkable improved school attendance by girls. Women representation in Namibia is commendable, especially in parliament. I'm sorry to slow down. Especially in parliament, which is currently at 51% in the National Assembly and 14% in the National Council. Sorry, Mr. President, the technology is also somehow failing us. Sorry for that. I'm going up. Sorry. Yeah, I was go back. Go up again. Apart from numerical strength, women have been occupying strategic position in parliament and cabinet. At the level of cabinet, we have At the level of cabinet, we have ministries such as the Minister of Trade and Industry, the Minister of Higher Education, the Minister of Women, that are occupied both by women. Women at the level of parliament are occupying position of deputy speakers of the National Assembly and vice chairperson of the National Council. We have also the women chief whips in 4 of our 11 political parties represented in the National Assembly. 2 women chairpersons out of 8 parliamentary standing committees. In the public service, the Department of Public Service Management reported 43% of women in management position during the last financial year. Mr. President, there has been a great appreciation of the positive role that women play in society. Today, there are more girls in education than in the past at every level, from primary education to tertiary level. It has been recognized that women have distinctive contributions to make to the well-being of society as a whole. As we continue to advance the cause of women, proposal for the amendment of the Electoral Act to achieve gender parity and adopt special measures such as a quota to increase the number of women candidates who are successful in regional governance election, as well as the number of indigenous women elected to legislate bodies at all levels is ongoing. Additionally, the amendments to the Electoral Act will be extended to include the prohibition of matters of cyberbullying and the deepfake, which often discourage women from taking part in elective positions. I beg your pardon. Mr. President, as I am concluding, women's political participation and representation is not only a fundamental human right, but is an indispensable key for sustainable development and democracy. Women are clearly entitled to participate and represent themselves in processes and institutions where decisions that are affecting their lives are made. In conclusion, Mr. President, I support the adoption of the report. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I will now give the floor to one of the members from Malawi.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And on the onset, let me declare to say I support the report, ably moved by the mover and the seconder, and I also support all the recommendations. However, Mr. President, I would also want us as a region to pat ourselves on the back for a job well done, We have witnessed 3 female presidents in the region. We have witnessed vice presidents. And you see, these are things that a lot needs to be done, yes, but we're also doing a lot already. Because we've seen great nations, big nations that have even refused to vote for a female president in the past 8 years. And when we look at our leaderships within the parliaments, the speakers, the female speakers, they have even shown that they're able to do more than a man would do. I'll testify for my country, Malawi. For my country, Malawi speaker, when you look at Catherine Gotan-Hara, the Speaker of the National Assembly, she has got that motherly love that she takes she takes care of the well-being of members of Parliament. She makes sure on time. She makes sure she's delivering for the nation. So I want to urge our region to say we are not yet there, but we should really look forward and thank ourselves that we are making positive steps. And because these are steps that we cannot see them because we're not able to compare. I remember we had traveled to Europe with the Secretary General, and she posed the question in one of the meetings when we were in Berlin to say what is the proportionate on the gender balance. And surprisingly, they said we're not yet at the 50-50%. They spoke about 30-35% of the females. Meaning to say, as much as we will downlook on ourselves, but Mr. President, I believe we are making strides. And when it comes to the issue of the youth, I think we should we should really understand to say the world is changing, things are changing, and now we have got this phenomenon which is called Gen Z. And when we look at Gen Z, really what they're doing now is exactly what our elders did when we start going through history, like Professor Kajivivi in the 1960s, when we heard about his touching story. If we look at how old was he then, he was a youth. If we go to the Dean of the Speakers, Mudenda, Speaker of the National Assembly of the Republic of Zimbabwe, if we ask around in the 1960s, how old was he? He was the youth. And whatever they did then, it was not pleasing for the colonial masters. And what the youth would be demanding, the youth of today, is also they want to have a participation on the table. And I would also want to urge the youth to say, it's not about kicking the old out. No, it's about keeping the old out. We tap the wisdom, but we work with them. But also the elder need to understand to say they need to invite us on the table. Because the moment they don't invite us on the table, then we're going to be prone to these demonstrations, because when you look at the demonstrations or protests, you'd find that the majority are the youth. And why are the youth there? It's because these youth, they're looking for economic freedom. They have no jobs. They have no social security. So these are the issues that really, Mr. President, I think we really need to tap and we really need to look at them critically, because I believe modern problems, they've got modern solutions. So when you look at the way the technology is moving, I know the elders are doing a lot, but also it's high time for them to invite us to dine together on the table so that we can also offer the little knowledge that we can have with our generation to tell them exactly what we want, and they should assist us with the knowledge they have. Because I believe from the time that they joined the political arena, they've got quite vast experience that we would really need to tap through. And also when we look at when we talk of the girl child and protecting the girl child, this is something that for me, when I think about it, it hurts me, because I've got sisters, I've got a mother, I've got aunts, and when you see this gender-based violence on other women, you should feel and say, if that was my sister, if that was my daughter, if that was my mom, what would we do? But I also think that it has to be concurrently with the boy child as well. Because the boy child needs to be taught how to be a gentleman. The boy child needs to be taught how to treat a woman. The boy child needs to be taught that a woman is not a machine or a slave. So when we start up bringing these two at par, I'm sure we're most likely to make a better nation. But Mr. President, I support the report entirely. I submit. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I will now give the floor to one of the members from Eswatini.
Thank you very much, Honorable President, for the opportunity to address this Honorable House. Mr. President, I concur with the mover and the seconder of the motion. The SADC Parliamentary Forum has great potential to amplify citizens' voices in the regional integration process. To this end, Mr. President, I support the following key strategies: leveraging technology, facilitate virtual forums to ensure broader participation across states, addressing cross-border challenges, foster collaborative solutions to issues affecting our region, capacity building and policy advocacy, advocate for harmonized laws and policies that support socio-economic integration across SADC, fostering inclusive socio-economic development, prioritize policies that empower marginalized groups, including women, youth, and persons with disabilities, promoting equitable access, ensure resources and opportunities are distributed fairly across member states. Mr. President, these initiatives will only be effective if gender parity is recognized and prioritized within SADC member states. Legislative reforms are essential. Member states should enforce quotas, revise electoral laws, and amend constitutions to ensure equal representation of women in politics and decision-making. Economic empowerment for women is equally critical. Achieving gender parity in politics and leadership by 2035 requires concerted effort, Mr. President. Allow me to highlight the strides Eswatini has made towards gender parity and power sharing. Legislative and constitutional reforms. In 2018, Eswatini passed the Election of Women Act, mandating a minimum representation of women in parliament. Quota was enforced. Capacity building and political education. During the 2023 elections, Eswatini launched the Khetha Mage campaign, meaning vote for a woman. This initiative provided leadership training for women and received strong advocacy from their majesties. The campaign culminated in the historic appointment of a woman, our beloved Honorable Thulisile Dladla, a Deputy Prime Minister, an inspiring milestone for gender representation. Economic empowerment. Eswatini supports women-led businesses through initiatives like the Women Farmer of the Year Awards, encouraging participation in agriculture and entrepreneurship. Cultural and social transformation. Comprehensive public awareness campaigns to challenge gender stereotypes, exemplified by the recent Gender-Based Violence Summit, which highlighted the need to address systemic inequalities. These initiatives demonstrate Eswatini's commitment to gender parity and underscore the importance of integrating citizens' voices into governance. With these remarks, Mr. Speaker, I wholeheartedly support the report of the JWAT Standing Committee. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I now recognize the member from Zambia who wishes to address.
Thank you, Mr. President, for giving me this opportunity to make a comment on the motion to adopt the report by the GEWAD Committee. Mr. President, the report sheds light on critical issues affecting the youth in our region. I strongly support the report's emphasis on tackling child marriage, gender-based violence, and promoting equitable access to education and skills development for women and youth. This point, Mr. President, is in line with what is currently obtaining in Zambia, where the government has introduced the Education for All policy, which has introduced free education from grade 1 to grade 7, and for the pupils who are in grade 8 to grade 12, they are eligible to apply for CDF secondary school bursaries or sponsorship. Mr. President, the enhanced CDF that we have in Zambia also has a specific component that is meant to support youths who want to go and study skills, youths who are aged 35 and below. Mr. President, the call for increased advocacy on the domestication of the SADC model law on eradicating child marriage and stricter penalties for offenders is a step in the right direction. Moreover, the report's recommendation for expanded educational opportunities for girls alongside life skills and economic empowerment programs is essential in reducing pressures for early marriages and vulnerability to GBV. Mr. President, I also appreciate the report's focus on improving youth representation in decision-making processes at national and regional levels. The encouragement of future thinking in SADC policy making, addressing youth employment, digital literacy, and skills gaps, particularly for women and the youth, is crucial in promoting eco-economic participation across the region. Mr. President, the report's recommendations on reducing the digital divide for women and youth, particularly in rural areas, are also noteworthy. The urgent need for digital inclusion commitments, addressing legal gaps, and ensuring gender and youth responsive budgeting for expanding digital infrastructure is essential in promoting affordable internet access and digital literacy. As I conclude, Mr. President, allow me to commend the GEWAD Committee for their comprehensive report, which prioritizes the needs and concerns of the youth in our region. I look forward to seeing the implementation of these recommendations, which will undoubtedly contribute to a more inclusive and equitable society for all. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Member. I will give the floor to a second member from Namibia who had raised the flag.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, honorable members. I am delighted to contribute to this important topic, which is intended to look at ways in which we can all work together as a collective to advance issues of gender equality and women empowerment in our region. Our women and girls, or us women and girls, struggle with a number of challenges such as gender-based violence, teenage pregnancies, harmful cultural practices, and lack of representation in positions of power, amongst others. Most of these challenges are rooted in patriarchy that further pushes our women and girls on the periphery. Lack of cooperation from amongst ourselves as women in our quest to end these inequalities also remains a huge challenge. It is therefore imperative that we work together as a team to confront issues such as this and find amicable solutions. As women, we have not collaborated more and working as a united front to confront issues of gender parity and other issues affecting women and the girl child, and this will go a long way in improving conditions. Mr. President, despite many challenges confronting us as women in Namibia, I can proudly say that we are amongst the countries with the highest female representation in Parliament. As I speak, women members of Parliament have overtaken their male counterparts at over 53% in the National Assembly. However, in the other House of Parliament, which is the National Council, and who deals with the first past the post, we we are still lacking and relatively low at 14.29%. Out of the total number of 21 cabinet ministers, there are 9 female ministers and 16 deputy ministers out of a total of 20. I can also proudly say that we have just elected our first female president, who will take over the reins of power on 21st March 2025. Mr. President, honorable members, are largely due to the ruling party's deliberate move to introduce the Zebra-style policy that compels it to elect members on its party list based on 50-50 gender representation. I look forward to the day when this noble idea is made into law, so that all political parties can be compelled to do the same. I implore on SADC member states to emulate this gesture, which is very important, as empowering women and girls is key to addressing the underlying causes of vices such as gender-based violence, amongst others. As I am concluding, Honorable President, honorable members, partners have also been heavily involved in empowering women on issues aimed at advancing gender equality in Namibia. One of those partners have been the IPU, which recently held a workshop to look at important issues such as our joint Women's Parliamentary Caucus, its strategic plan and future function, including lobbying, advocacy, gender mainstreaming and gender responsive budgeting, amongst many other areas of interest. Thus, realization of a joint Women's Parliamentary Caucus will reunite both houses of Parliament in a common purpose and amplify our voices as women, members of Parliament for gender. President, on this must, it must maybe be my last contribution here at the SADC Parliamentary Forum, as I do not know whether I will be redeployed again to SADC Parliament. And thank you for being with us as Namibians. I do not know, all of us don't know whether we'll be coming back next year again to SADC Parliament, including my speaker. And I so submit, Honorable President, and I submit the vote.
I will now recognize the second member from Malawi. There is no second member from Malawi. Can I call on the
South Africa?
I will move to the second member from Eswatini. I'm sorry, I will not be taking any new names for addresses because of the constraint of time. Eswatini.
Thanks once again, Honorable President, for this opportunity. I rise to support this report. And before that, Honorable President, I also want to thank the Honorable Speaker of Zambia for organizing a dinner for the ladies last night. I hope they really enjoyed, because she gave them a significance of life. She deserves a hand of applause, I know. Honorable President, as a country of Eswatini, we are calling that the brutality, and I repeat, the violence against women must come to an end. It has been long overdue. And the country of Eswatini calls that SADC member states must impose harsh
sentences against such perpetrators. Eswatini is further advocating for a life register for such perpetrators. Honorable President, if I would add from this, I'll be spoiling it. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. We have a third member from Eswatini who had raised the flag. If there is none, I will proceed by giving the floor to the mover of the motion to respond. I believe I missed the Treasurer of Eswatini, who had begun to take the floor. Honourable, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity. To do better, but certainly there is a paradigm shift from the old-fashioned way of thinking and culture that we should leave other sectors behind as we develop, namely in particular the youth and the women folk categories. But my question or comment to this august House, Mr. President, is of course want to congratulate, offer my appreciation to the mover of the motion that has been eloquently and articulately presented. In her presentation, she made reference to decriminalizing abortion. I just wanted some comment on that. Maybe I missed the unpacking of what that means, because the House will agree that such usually attracts debate and argumentativeness as to what this means. Sometimes it is referred to interchangeably with legalizing, but where I want to be clear, are we talking about decriminalization in general or in particular circumstances? I really want to be clear there. Legalizing, decriminalizing abortion in general terms, because if I were to illustrate with this concept in our country, it is strictly controlled under the Constitution. It can only be allowed under certain circumstances. I was just wondering, Mr. Chairman, if maybe the honorable member and minister could shed some light based on what I've just alluded to. I thank you, Chair.
I have been notified that I missed one member from Namibia who had raised his hand originally, so I believe it is fair to allow the member to address. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise as one of the few young people who were given the opportunity to spear the youth revolution in our current generation and to ensure that young people are given the opportunity to sit here in numbers and not just one or two people. And I would like to deliberate, Mr. President, in support of the report, as it represents the cornerstone of inclusive development. However, the voices of women and youth must not only be heard, but must be acted upon. Therefore, this report serves as an important blueprint for advocating gender equality and youth empowerment across our member states. Now, I would like to highlight that gender inequality, systematic patriarchy, and youth disenfranchisement are not abstract problems, but they are intentional design of an exploitative system that continues to perpetuate inequality for the benefit of a few. Now, there are various issues that stem from this unequal, unjust system, such as unequal power dynamics that women and youth continue to face as they remain sidelined in decision-making processes. Therefore, representation without adequate redistribution of resources and power is not representation at all. Therefore, throughout the region, women and young people continue to perform the bulk of unpaid labor while the economy rewards those that exploit those young people. And the young people are continuously fed with promises of entrepreneurship while their education systems fail them and leave them at the vulnerable state at the mercy of exploitative markets. Honorable President, it is therefore important to say that young people and women must own the means of production, a mandate that provides at least not 50% of new business license and land allocations to young people and to women, with state subsidies that, considering the full inflationary consequences that may arise with such policies. Further, Honorable President, it is important that with these recommendations that have been pushed by the mover are important, but therefore a SADC parliamentary forum must call for the establishment of a gender and youth tribunal to investigate and uphold members that are going to agree to this report, that they ensure that they are not failing to meet the gender equality and the youth empowerment recommendations that are going to be tabled and seconded today. And further, Mr. President, I would like to say, in the liberation movement, in the liberation struggle, there were songs that stated that they are fighting for the rights of the future generation. I would like to say, Honorable President, that the future generation has come and we are ready and we want to lead.
Thank you, Honorable Member. With that, we will conclude the debate, and I will give the floor to the mover of the motion. Before I do that, let me apologize to the Honorable Charlene Raymond for not recognizing her right of reply at the end of the previous motion. Although the debate was very short, I should have accorded you the courtesy. It is due to the result of a long week in the chair. Thank you. Honorable Kasune, you have the floor, and I hope you will be able to summarize, bring together all the comments from the various country members.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to say that due to the interest of time and indeed the many responses, I will do my very best to be mindful of that, but also to try and help what the members had actually brought to our attention. I think the first contributor was, first of all, I'm so overwhelmed by the people who contributed. I forgot to appreciate my vice chair person who ably seconded the motion, and this is Senator Tao Marco Hale. Thank you so very much. And it has been great serving together on this committee, and keep up the good work. The first person that I want to recommend to speak to is the honorable member from Zimbabwe, who actually spoke to us on how they have revised the gender and development policy, and how this has been also important to make sure that there is also a financial component, because we cannot talk about development or empowering women and youths without looking at the economic and the financial financial support. I think this is something that she has also attributed to the great numbers around the youth participation, where they have about 21 youths in their parliament, in their caucus. This is highly recommendable. The honorable member from South Africa called us to really focus on the need to end violence happening in our jurisdictions, and especially the conflicts around, because these affect usually women and youths. As we all know, they say the face of poverty, the face of war is usually the women themselves. Also, she called us once more to emphasize the report, the need for awareness raising for the information that is so rich within the SADC Parliamentarian Forum, but it does not reach our citizens in our different countries. It ends up with us, maybe who are members of the SADC Parliamentary Forum, but we need to raise the awareness in our different parliaments. My colleague from Namibia also bemoaned the slowness of enacting some of the model laws, but also the laws that we may have within our own countries, but also celebrated the big numbers that Namibia has, especially as it relates to women participation. More importantly, for my colleague, talked about the zero taxing on the sanitary pads. This is very important, and I think as SADC member states we should take this and emulate this. I think this could be one of the resolutions that we make out of this, that pads should either be tax-free, as Namibia has done, but also just free. As someone has commented before, that menstrual is not a choice, it's something that happens to women and girls, and if condoms are free, which we usually make a choice to use them, why don't the sanitary pads be free, so that we can fight menstrual poverty? I think that is something that we should take away as a plenary. My colleague from Malawi spoke about the need for Africa, and in particular the SADC region, to drum its own drum. I think maybe it's part of, as Africans, we're used to the sad news, and so we don't usually know when to celebrate the great news that is among us. As already alluded to, among the 3 presidents that have actually held here in the region of Africa, the many speakers that we are celebrating, and indeed we can testify to just their exemplary leadership and the way they have performed, even within the. And also he highlighted the vice presidents also. Hasn't happened in the regions that we usually look up to. So I think Africa, we should merge as a voice, as an advocate, as an example, as it relates to women becoming presidents. He also challenged us and reminded us that as we advocate for women's rights, we should not neglect the boy, in particular of raising the boy to be that boy who respects the woman if we are to fight this gender parity. The colleague from Eswatini talked about the quotas and the importance of that, and talked about the campaign for voting for a woman, and that's how they got some of the women in the influential places. They also talked about the need to revise some of our electoral systems within our countries. My colleague from Zambia attributed some of the successes in eradicating child marriage as it relates to the government's free policy under President Hakainde Hichilema, and indeed the Game Changer Community Development Fund that has really made sure that those who are over the age, who are in 8th grade and above, they can also access these secondary bursaries, but also skills bursaries. In his submission, he also talked about the need of budgeting, responsive budgeting if we are going to fight the digital divide that exists among women, and especially those young youths and women in rural areas. Number 7, then another colleague from Namibia also highlighted the zebra system as being one of the reasons why they have now a whopping 53% of women in their National Assembly. I think this is recommendable, and we countries who are lagging behind, we should emulate, and these are just some of the ways they've gotten to the numbers they have, in addition to her colleague who had already spoken. Eswatini came back and talked about the need to address the serious gender-based violence, but also, as we were to end, there was another member, the treasurer, who came up and talked about the need for the committee to clarify its stance on decriminalization of abortion. So why the committee had that report. Sorry, I'm trying to read because I know that this is a very sensitive issue, and which is going to differ from every country. For example, in Zambia, abortion may not be allowed per se, but under certain circumstances, such as your health is being your health is at risk, if you get some permission from the medical staff, under those circumstances, it is allowed, and it's going to differ from every country. But I think in our report we talked about supporting the choice for women to choose for themselves. I think that's where the question is coming from. I do not have I don't have a clear answer on this, except to say that it's a personal choice most likely, and the traditional views as well as our religious views and our country stance will really come into play. So I'll revert back to maybe the committee to bring a more written response on this one, knowing that issues of abortion are very much political and sometimes are very different from each country, for a much better response, so that I do not mislead the House. Lastly but not the least, our young people from Namibia are reminding us that they are here and they are ready to take over power and to rule. And young people, we say you are welcome, especially as gay-wide. We are ready for you. But understand that you need also to learn from us as we learn from you. I think there was also a submission that we should invite, I think from Malawi, our young people to help us with the digital gap that we have, because they are more faster, they are more eloquent. On that note, Mr. President, and to the August House, I would be remiss if I didn't thank my own country under the able leadership of Madam Nelly Muti, our Right Honorable, who had given me the opportunity under her leadership to be part of the SADC Parliamentarian Forum, as well as my colleagues from the Zambian delegation, and indeed those that have come. It has been a great opportunity and a great honor, and just an amazing experience to learn from all of you, the great speakers from the different countries. You have installed in me so much wisdom, so much knowledge, that I'm going out full, and yet I came so empty. And to all my colleagues, I just want to say thank you. Please continue enjoying our Zambia in the sun. And I think the competition is real for Zimbabwe as they host the next plenary session, because Zambia has outdone itself. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kasune, for concluding on the motion. I will now put the question that the report of the Standing Committee on Gender Equality, Women Advancement and Youth Development be adopted. Are there any objections? There being none, the report of the Standing Committee on Gender Equality, Women Advancement and Youth Development is duly adopted. Thank you. Honorable members, we are just short of 5 minutes before our scheduled break. I would like to credit that short time to your break, but ask you to be here promptly at 11:30 to continue. May I remind members who will be presenting motions that if their motions are long, they should always take the opportunity to summarize since the documents are available. I will remind honorable members that I'm doing my best to advance our program in order to meet the invitation for our boat cruise this afternoon, which is scheduled for 4 p.m. Thank you, and we resume at 11:30.
Mid-break has been taken until 11:30. Progress has so far been made, and we saw at the beginning of this boarding session administration of oath of two members that were admitted before the forum, and took oath of adherence. And then after that, we have had a report of the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus, which has been adopted, and this was in a motion that was moved by Honorable Shirley Joseph Raymond, who was the chairperson, and seconded by Rachel Zulu, who's the vice chairperson. And of course, we saw deliberations coming from other members of Parliament who are part of this gathering. Then the motion was accordingly adopted. The second report was moved by Honorable Princess Kasune, who is the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Gender Equality, Women Advancement and Youth Development, and seconded by Senator Tato Mako Moha, who is the vice chairperson. And it has just since been adopted after some deliberations, again from members of Parliament. And that has brought us to a short break, whose business is expected to resume at about 11:30. And when we come back, we expect a motion on enhancing efforts to integrate comprehensive sexual education, CSE, into national school curricula in SADC member states. And this one motion will be moved by Honorable Tato Mohale Lesotho, and the second is Senator Linda Kumalo from Eswatini. We'll be back on the other side. In the meantime, thank you so much for having made part of the audience for this morning. You are watching Parliament Television and also listening to Parliament Radio. And thank you so much also for following us on our social media platforms.
Recording stopped. And 5. Confirm with one-time passcode that was sent to your mobile. Step 6. Sign in using your phone number and the 4-digit PIN. And Step 7. Create your submission and submit. My e-Parliament, bringing Parliament closer to you.
Good evening, depending on where you are.
This is Mwene Luhamba, Member of Parliament for Mangango constituency in Kaoma district in Western Province. I am born from Kamanisha village in Ibambua ward. I schooled at Muito Primary School. We used to cross the Luena River every morning, going to school and crossing back, going home. That has been my and our life in childhood. And from Muito Basic, I went to Kambule Technical Secondary School in Mongu. From Kambule, I went to St. Mark's Secondary School. That is where I finished my grade 12. And from there, I went to the Livingstone Teachers Training College and trained as a teacher. So I'm a primary school teacher also by profession. And after that, I went also to the University of Zambia, and I did business administration. And from there, I went to Mulungushi University. I did a bachelor's degree in commerce, and I majored in economics, which we call BCom Economics. From there, I've been working as a teacher actually from the time I left the Livingstone Teachers Training College. I've been teaching. I taught in Choma, Chongwe, and Lusaka finally.